The ending of Antoine Fuqua's Michael has posed questions when it comes to the rest of Michael Jackson's life and career. There's obviously a lot to still cover in a second movie, and with the first one ending the way it does, I think it has most of us wondering what will be covered and how will it be adapted. While Michael Part 2 is yet to be officially confirmed by Lionsgate and Universal, the box office on the first film is already huge, and they have already shot a lot of that material. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing the ending of the first Michael movie, what will likely be covered in the second film, how that might be adapted, and also how they could approach the allegations now that the third act has been reworked. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my upcoming videos on the latest theatrical releases like Michael, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into the ending of Michael and what it means for Michael Part 2. So the first Michael movie closes not with scandal or controversy, but with a sense of personal triumph for Michael. After the final victory tour show, which ends with a beautiful Human Nature performance, Michael Jackson tells the crowd that this will be the last time that he and his brothers perform together. When he walks off stage, Joe is forced to accept that he can't keep Michael tied to the group anymore. Even Michael's security guard, Bill Bray, blocks Joe when he tries to intervene. And as Michael heads out, the film transitions seamlessly back to the cold open, with Michael warming up in the Wembley Stadium corridor, preparing to step out in front of the massive audience waiting for him during his Bad Tour show in 1988. Michael is then shown as completely evolved, no longer the scared kid desperate for approval, but a worldwide superstar who can captivate massive crowds with nothing more than a look, a movement, or a single note. It's the film's strongest expression of his triumph. He's a young man who had survived a tough childhood, reshaped global culture, and redefined what a performer could be, finally breaking away from Joe Jackson's control and on top of the world creatively as a solo artist. Now, of course, early drafts of the Michael script reportedly pushed it deeper into the 90s, touching on the turbulence that would soon reshape his life. However, legal complications with the Jackson estate and the sensitive nature of the allegations that emerged in 1993 forced the filmmakers to rethink the structure entirely. Instead of compressing Michael's most complex decade into a third act, the creative team had to split the story into two films, allowing the first one to focus on Michael's creative separation from Joe and his rise, and then the second film to potentially confront everything that came after. And this shift fundamentally changed the emotional structure of Michael. The first film became a somewhat character study, an exploration of Michael's inner world, his relationship with Joe Jackson, and the psychological cost of becoming a global icon. It allowed the film to close on the last moment before Michael's life became defined by forces outside of his control. It preserved the purity of his artistic peak, giving audiences a chance to breathe in the magnitude of his achievements without immediately colliding with the controversies that would dominate the next decade. The filmmakers understood that to tell the full truth of Michael's life in its brilliance, its contradictions, and its tragedies, they needed space, nuance, and time. So making Michael Part 2 becomes that space. It's the film that will step into the years that the first movie deliberately avoided, not as an afterthought, but as a central narrative of that second film. The allegations, the media frenzy, and the shifting public perception are a defining crucible of Michael's adult life, and they require a film that can handle them with clarity, sensitivity, and narrative weight. So by ending the first movie in 1988, Antoine Fuqua and his creative team could still preserve the integrity of Michael's rise while preparing audiences for a second chapter that will potentially be darker, more complex, and far more emotionally charged. So following the triumphant Wembley performance that closes the first film, Michael Part 2 would step directly into the most turbulent, creatively explosive, and emotionally fraught era of Michael Jackson's life, the years where the myth and the man begin to collide. The second movie would have an enormous canvas to work with because everything after 1988 is a story of extremes. There is still a staggering sense of artistic ambition, unprecedented global influence, but also mounting pressures that would eventually reshape his public identity. I think that the second film would likely open with Michael still within the bad era, exhausted but creatively restless, already dreaming of the next evolution of his sound. Michael also moved into Neverland around this same time, so we could see that play out, and how he allowed hundreds of kids into his home as a gesture of warmth. Soon after this, the Dangerous era begins, an era defined by his partnership with Teddy Riley, the birth of New Jack Swing, and Michael's determination to reinvent himself yet again. The movie could explore the long nights in the studio, the extreme perfectionism that pushed him to record hundreds of songs, but then also the emotional isolation that grew as fame tightened around him. From there, the film could naturally move into the early 1990s, capturing the cultural explosion of Black or White, the global impact of the Dangerous World Tour, the iconic Super Bowl performance which the director did say we might see, and the philanthropic projects that became central to his identity, including Heal the World and his humanitarian visits. It was also around the end of the 80s and the start of the 90s when MJ's vitiligo took a big turn, and I think the film should really show how that reshaped his image dramatically. We obviously got a scene or two mentioning it in the first film, so I'm sure that they're going to touch on that a bit more come part 2. Moving on, as it all happened in real life, I imagine part 2 placing the first allegations right in the middle of the Dangerous World Tour. The news broke during rehearsal, and we could then get into his televised statement defending his innocence, capturing both the composure he tried to project and the turmoil underneath. Now, the film will have to walk an extraordinarily delicate line when it reaches the years defined by these allegations. The Chandler case, which was originally part of the first film's third act before being removed and reshot, is the clearest example of how complicated this territory is. The filmmakers can't depict specific accusers without legal permission, and they can't recreate exact courtroom events without navigating a minefield of rights, sensitivities, and ethical considerations. So the question becomes, how do you tell the story of Michael Jackson's life after 1988 without ignoring the events that shaped his public identity? Well, I think the answer most likely is in perspective. Michael Part 2 may choose to tell the story entirely from Michael's point of view, meaning we never see the accusers, never dramatize their testimonies, and never recreate the courtroom in a literal sense. Instead, we might experience a lot of the fallout the way Michael did, through headlines, through lawyers' briefings, through the emotional and physical toll that it took on him behind closed doors. This approach would allow the film to acknowledge the allegations without showing them. Rather than showing the Chandler family or the Oviso family, the film could focus on the ripple effects, the way the press descended like a storm, the way Michael's health deteriorated under the pressure, and the way his trust in the world fractured. By keeping the camera on Michael, the film could avoid the legal pitfalls of depicting real accusers while still honouring the emotional truth of what those years meant for him. It could become a story about perception, in how the world's image of Michael shifted, how he tried to fight back through his music, and how the weight of public scrutiny became its own antagonist. On top of this, we might also see his legal team urging him to settle the case of '93, explaining why they believe paying the accusers is the most strategic option, especially with his tour being days away. Anyone familiar with the 1993 case knows that this moment is one of the great tragic pivots of Michael's life. He was positioned to win that trial, and loads of dirt on the accusers came out much later, but the pressure of the ongoing tour and the mounting media frenzy left him trapped in a lose-lose situation. And then the settlement, intended to make it all stop, only opened the door to more accusations in the decade that followed. So if Michael's perspective of this is allowed in the film, it could then show the emotional cost of that decision, showing how the fallout lingered, how it eroded his trust, his health, and his sense of safety over time. It would be a kind of slow accumulating damage that would give the second film its emotional spine. Following this period, I think the film could also include his marriage to Lisa Marie Presley, a relationship often misunderstood but deeply significant in his attempts to reclaim normalcy. Now, there is a chance she might not be in the film, as the estate would previously have to get permission from the Presley estate, so they might just skip past that and focus on a time a bit after the History album instead. Regardless of what route they do take, I do think that they have to at least include the making of history, as that could serve as another dramatic anchor point of the second film. It's an album that is forged in defiance and artistic fury, with Michael using his music as both his shield and his sword against the prior allegations and also the reporting of him during that period. I think the film could explore the symbolism of the history album, the militaristic imagery, and the way Michael tried to defend the narrative about him through sheer creative force. On top of this, like with how we got the Thriller music video used in the first film, I think the video for They Don't Care About Us might be part 2's version of that. It could bookend this section of the film about defiance and have even more emotional weight behind it than what we got with Thriller in part 1. And then as we move into the late 90s and early 2000s, the film could then showcase Michael as a father, which was one of the happier moments of his life. Again, during that time, it could be contrasted with the increasingly hostile media environment. But in saying this, I don't think we'll get any of the trial scenes from around 2005, as I think the film may instead focus on how he was physically weakened and psychologically drained from that whole experience. And coming to the ending stretch of Michael Part 2, I think the film should focus on how Michael returns from his retreat, the fragility that remains during that period, and then him finally coming back for his This Is It rehearsals at the very end. These scenes will be rich with emotional weight as Michael rediscovers his passion for performing and pushes himself to create one final masterpiece. He was dealing with a lot of medication for his physical and emotional pain during this time, so that could be depicted as the personal struggle throughout. But while I say this, I don't think the film will depict the complications surrounding his passing out of respect and because of the trial that followed. Maybe the film could end on a moment of quiet reflection or Michael imagining himself performing at his final tour. It could end on a single spotlight or a lingering sense of what might have been. Maybe something that could mirror the ending of the first film, but with a deeper, more bittersweet resonance. So overall, I think Michael Part 2 would be the story of a man fighting to hold on to his identity as the world around him grows louder, harsher, and more demanding. It would be a film about resilience, vulnerability, and the cost of being the most famous person on the planet. I think the ending will honour Michael's legacy without sensationalising his final days, becoming a story not about how he died, but about how he lived, fought, created, and endured. And in doing so, the film will complete the arc that began in part 1 with the journey of a boy who became a legend, and a legend who spent the rest of his life trying to remain human. If part 1 was about becoming Michael Jackson, then part 2 is about surviving as him. But that was my video discussing the Michael ending and what we might see adapted in the second film. What do you think towards the way the first Michael film ended, and what are your predictions for how director Antoine Fuqua will approach the events of a Michael Part 2? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, alongside your overall reaction towards the first film. For much more videos and breakdowns, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, rating, and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.